again. Tonight we have the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Office. Nick Cundall is going to talk to us tonight, and his sidekick, Peyton, what's your last name?
Felter. It's a long one.
Okay. Well, thanks guys for coming. You got a fairly good crowd, so have at it.
Thank you for having us. They gave us this fancy microphone, so let's see this.
Okay.
Is this good volume? Can't hear Phil.
It's not on.
What? Talk about. Alright. We're having issues with microphones, so I'm just going to talk loud. Is this loud enough for you guys all hear me? Perfect. The way this is going to kind of look so far is I think I'll probably talk to you guys for about 30 to 40 minutes. I don't want to talk your ear out too much, so I only have time for you guys to have questions. So I have a short presentation. There'll be a few videos we'll look at throughout the presentation. And again, we'll have time for questions afterwards. So first and foremost, I'm Nick Cundall. I'm the District Wildlife Manager for the Estes Park District. My previous is in the Berthoud District from 2022 to 2024. That's where Peyton is at now. My schooling, I went to Florida State University for a bachelor's in wildlife biology. Not much more about that. I'll let Peyton introduce himself.
Yeah, like Nick said, my name is Peyton Coulter. I'm currently in the Berthoud District. Been with the agency for a few years now. From Kansas, that's why I was to Kansas my degree in environmental studies. And I also did a little bit of graduate work from the state to get a certificate in wildlife management. So excited to be here with you all tonight. Happy to have some good conversation going. So
Thanks for coming, guys. Without a microphone, you're going to have to speak up and enunciate.
all right.
Let's see if we get a microphone.
I'm referring to me.
Check.
Would you use us as your share district?
Even put a stuff in the parent. You don't want to share. What?
Joking?
Or,
Yeah.
You guys have to talk about some
I think like Eve or and then it helps actually, like instead of this, it helps to do this. No, or your choice, yes, just for her.
Check user meter.
yeah, right there.
Okay.
Thanks, Andy.
So when we get started, we're going to do some background first. I don't know why these pictures are popping up like that. But the way we describe it to people, our job is kind of a lot of it's just touching the surface of it. The way we try to describe it to people is we split it into thirds. So 1/3 of our job is wildlife biology. We all are required to have a degree in wildlife biology to do this job. Another third of it is going to be law enforcement. So we are state certified police officers. We mostly focus on wildlife law. Also. And the last third is education. So events like this, we teach hunters education, we teach camps, like kids summer camps, all kinds of stuff. I always hear a few other important things on here, like customer service. A lot of times we'll help our front office. We're here to answer questions for anyone. We respond to bear calls, elk calls. You'll see a bunch of that later. We have a few properties that we maintain. Most of them are down in Loveland in our area, so there's not a ton of them up here. The only state wildlife area we have up here is Twin Sisters, off of Highway 7 over there.
Say that again.
Twin Sisters State Wildlife Area. That's one of our properties that we have. It's off of Highway 7. there's like no trails I think to get to it, so it's just a mountaintop.
Isolated.
Yeah. But it's public lands, public and access, and that's one of the things we care a lot about is public access. And last thing on there is probably the biggest thing we deal with, especially this time of year, is human wildlife conflict, particularly with bears right now, but during the spring we have elks that are gathered, and during the fall we have the rut. Anything else to add to that, Pete?
Nope, you hit the nail on the head. That's what I've been doing all day. I'm actually on call, so every day, excuse me, there's an officer from our area that we're on call for each day. So today is my lucky day. I've been on call since 12:01 this morning. And then I'll end my day at 11:59 tonight. So, but yeah, I've been getting a lot of bear calls. Had one here actually. I haven't told Nick this yet, but along the walking path over by the golf course. I had momentarily close that down because there's a sow and two cubs hanging out there hissing at golfers. Getting pretty territorial over cubs, not being pretty defensive. So close that down. I was able to get her cubs or to move on to a better spot and be able to show back up. So yeah, a lot of better stuff. A lot of better stuff.
Yeah, so we're grateful to have Nate here today. So you're not just stuck with me yapping at you. All right, is the microphone still working as well? I think we turned it off. Place. Probably not good. Well, we will go back to talking very loudly. That's right. So this here is a map of Area 2. That's where Paige and I work. So this is kind of like our whole team in general. This is our team. So you can see it kind of borders off. So this is Fort Collins. So Fort Collins is actually a separate area from us. We still work closely with them though, but they have their own team up there. So you can see this is how all of our districts are divided with our team. So see Estes right here with me, and then Peyton down here, he's got Allen's Park, Pinewood Springs, Lyons, and then he unfortunately goes all the way to I-25. So yeah, some fun stuff over there too. Cassie Penn is our other neighbor. She has the Loveland area, but she does go vacating quite a bit. It's there. And then most of the stuff south of here is all Boulder County stuff, so you're probably not super interested in that anyway. Alright. So this is the last bit of the yapping I'm going to do before we get into elk, because that's why we're all still there. But to learn about elk management, we have to go into the history of wildlife management in general. And that's for the North American model in general. So that's for Canada as well as the United States. And this came about after, I'm sure you guys all heard, when Europeans came over, they started killing a lot of bison without thinking what we were doing. A lot of animals were near extinction, including elk. So with this model, we were able to bring these populations back. And this is still the main model we follow today. So first we'll go a short video of it that kind of explains it better than I can.
During my time hunting here in New Zealand, I realized just how different countries approach wildlife conservation and natural resource management. It has made me especially appreciative of our own management strategy in the U.S. for wildlife as a public resource. Hunting management of the wildlife and fishing upon which our lifestyle depends is characterized by unique management regulation systems known as the North American model of wildlife conservation. The Europeans who first settled and explored our country had all come from cultures where wildlife and wild lands were the property of the elite landed gentry. The development of our nation was largely driven by North America's incredible wealth of renewable natural resources. There were few restrictions, and the free access of the public to exploit these resources was critical in building the United States and Canada. Today, the abundance of wildlife that we enjoy and its conservation and management are a reflection of the historic access to natural resources that our forefathers enjoyed. The combination of unrestricted access and the subsequent potential for overuse led to the founding of the wildlife conservation movement in the late 19th century and ultimately the codification of the North American model. There are 7 underlying principles upon which the North American conservation model is based. First, wildlife is a public trust resource. It is not owned by individuals, but is held in trust by the government for the benefit of present and future generations. The second principle is the elimination of commercial markets for wild game. Historic, unregulated, unsustainable commercial harvest of game animals and migratory birds led to federal and state laws that greatly restrict the sale of meat and other parts of these animals. These restrictions have been so successful in restoring game populations that today we enjoy something of an overabundance of some species, such as white-tailed deer, snow geese. Third, we allocate the use and harvest of wildlife by law. As a trustee, government manages wildlife in the interest of the beneficiaries, the present and future generations of the American public. Laws and regulations establish frameworks under which decisions can be made. These frameworks enable us to make decisions, such as which species can be hunted and which species cannot be taken because of their rarity or endangerment. The fourth principle holds that wildlife can only be taken for legitimate purposes. The slaughter of our game, frivolous purposes, will not be tolerated. Most states and Canadian provinces have forms of waste laws that require hunters to salvage as much meat as possible from legally killed game. The fifth principle recognizes wildlife as an international resource. A milestone in the implementation of this concept was the signing of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1960. In addition to the realization that waterfowl had an advantage across international boundaries, the protection of migratory songbirds was seen as critical in the protection of agricultural crops against insect pests. This act was the first to affect many more species than just those that were hunted. It was the first treaty to provide for international management of our wildlife resources. The next principle holds that management of our wildlife resources should be accomplished through science-based rather than purely emotional standards. The application of this principle has led to most of the advances in the management of a diverse array of wild animals and migratory birds. The last, and I would argue the most important principle underlying the North American model of conservation is what we call democracy of hunting. Theodore Roosevelt believed that society at large benefited if all people, regardless of origin or class, had access to opportunities for hunting. It is this concept that distinguishes the United States and Canada from many other nations, where the opportunities to hunt are restricted to those who have special status, such as land ownership or wealth. Those of us who've grown up hunting and fishing often take this for granted, but it's worthwhile every now and then to stop and think about how fortunate we are to live in a society where our wildlife resources are collectively ours to use and enjoy. If you want to find out more about what you can do to help secure hunting,
So again, that's kind of the big picture of how we manage wildlife. So the really important part, that was a lot to hear all at once, I understand that. So we're going to break it down into 7 principles again. I know you just heard them, but we'll talk about them a little more. So the first principle, wildlife resources are public trust, which means us as CPW, we manage wildlife, but we manage it for you guys. We don't own the wildlife. Not one individual owns the wildlife. We manage and own the wildlife. So it's a public trust. It's not just one person. CPW doesn't own that. And another important one, the second principle, is the prohibition of commercialization of wildlife. So that basically means no trophy hunting. No trophy hunting is unacceptable, and we won't allow it in the United States. If you are going to hunt, we make sure that we're utilizing every part of that animal. The rule of law. Rules and laws developed by the people and enforced by government agencies, that kind of goes hand in hand with the first principle we just talked about. But again, the wildlife is in public trust. You guys are trusting us to manage it, but it's still democracy. So we still vote on certain laws in regards to wildlife management, how our wildlife should be managed. Opportunity for all, that's just making it so everybody has access to natural resources, the outdoors, to wildlife, to fishing, all of that. Again, the prohibition of trophy hunting. Another important one is that wildlife is an international resource, meaning that we don't just manage it for the United States, we don't just manage it for Canada or Mexico, we manage it because birds don't recognize borders. So a lot of these migratory animals are going to go beyond our borders. So we need to manage them with an intention that we're also benefiting our neighbors that also share this wildlife with us. And lastly, science-based wildlife management. That one's pretty straightforward. It's what it sounds like. A lot of our decisions that we do, especially as the state of Colorado, is based on science. So now that all that jargon is out of the way, we can talk about elk. Finally. So elk is in the same family as deer, Cervidae. It is not the largest deer. You guys want to know what the largest deer is. Yeah. But they're up there, so males can weigh up to 1,000 pounds, which is huge. I'm sure you guys have seen all around Estes Park during the rut. Females don't get quite as big. A lot of it has to do, they don't have those big heads and big backs. That puts a lot of weight on them. And I'm sure you all know males grow and shed their antlers annually, and we see that all the time because they like to spend plenty of time in town here. So we can probably go outside right now and spot one and try and guys.
So by law, are people not allowed to buy and sell antlers that have fallen off?
It's a gray area. So we have it's called shed hunting, what you're referring to. Forks, you're not allowed to go pick up sheds during the winter time because we don't want to disturb them during those critical times. Afterwards, you can pick up sheds as long as it's during legal season. Also, from private property, shed hunt year round because we can't necessarily control what's going on private property. But no, most of the time people keep sheds for themselves. Or they donate them to a lot of them, because like you probably go into restaurants and see the giant antlers. Most of the time those are donated. I think I might skip this video. It's just going over the life cycle of an elk. We'll just talk about it instead, because I think it's a longer video. So the history of elk is thousands and thousands of years ago. The show is connected with Alaska by that bridge there, so that's how they're able to migrate over. That was thousands and thousands of years ago, and as we now know today, elk have begun going farther and farther south, so they're all the way down here, they're in Mexico. So they didn't just stay in that northern part of there. Historically, we don't have a ton of information because they weren't there all the time, but we do know, at least from Native American history, they were the main predator, starting in the 16th century all the way up until the 19th century when we came over and ruined it for everyone. So the population was abundant, and it was still way more abundant than they are now because we just took up so much of our land, especially because they used to actually be a plains species. Not a mountain species. They were adaptable, they could go in the mountains, and they still do, as you see. But before humans started to pressure them, they were a plain species. So they started moving out west because it's harder to hunt them up there between both the Native Americans and the Europeans crossing over. After the North American model was developed that we talked about in the 19th century, there was a bunch of reintroduction efforts, a bunch of laws that were put in place. Kind of state by state, but slowly they all started to adapt to that. And now we're back to as healthy as a population that we can have, but still coexist given that we took a lot of the property and a lot of the land that they were on. And a little bit later too, I think I have some numbers for actual local elk herd here, so we can talk about those numbers too a little bit.
Do you see the elk migrating to northern climates as climate change takes place?
I think my next slide is that.
Oh, sorry.
It's close. Maybe. Yeah, so this is basically everything I just said. I just got too excited. I had my But yeah, I think my next slide actually shows the migration we have here. Go ahead.
So were they with bison? Like the same area?
Yeah, because they're on the plains and so were the bison. So yeah, they were coexist with the bison, but the bison were a lot more numerous than the elk were, and they were kind of pushed out because the bison couldn't necessarily go up to higher elevations as easily. Yes, this is probably very difficult to look at, but all these little lines here are set of little elk herds and they're how they migrate every single year. Um, so we're somewhere here. You can see the front range right here. That's where the foothills are. So you can see that they just go east and then west. And we've seen that too because everybody knows when the elk start to go down to level, everyone sees their problem. There's like 1,500 when they go down there. But there is about 150 to 200 resident elk that stay in Estes Park year round. And there's also a few that stay in the national park as well, but I don't have the numbers on that. If I had to guess, I'd say maybe 50 elk that stay in the national park. What's that?
That sounds right.
About 50.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Perfect. Yes.
I think the state of the outline and
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, then about 200 stay in town in the neighborhood. The rest of them just go straight to Loveland, and we're starting to see that they actually are staying there longer and longer each year. We actually have a few resident herds out by I-25 of both that just like it there. There's cornfields, there's so what's that?
Year round.
Yes. Yeah, there's a few cows. I would say, I don't know, maybe between those because more of his district happens in.
Yeah,
Maybe between 30 to 50 year round. That's
I do.
about.
yeah, just west of Berthoud there. They right along 287. It's quite the wildlife crossing there. And they'll follow the Little Thompson River all the way to I-25 and back and forth throughout the year. Depending on food availability. So there's a lot of cornfields east of Berthoud, closer to I-25, and those elk, they like to make their way, have a snack here and there.
And it's not just the elk. We're starting to see bears and lions go farther. Last week, I got hit by a chronic brush or something.
I think you're right.
Yeah. So all the way up to brush, we're getting bears.
until we had the open lands surcharge on the sales tax in Laramie, Boulder, Jefferson County, and now we have a protected open space.
Yeah.
And nature reports back here. And
Yeah, they just
all
follow.
prior to that,
Yeah.
never saw.
Yeah, that even in Boulder County, I know it's far as Boulder County, we're starting to see bears and lions there just following those waterways. And sometimes they'll make their way back, but bears like trash, and there's lots of trash along things. They spend a lot of time on it.
It's not red meat. No.
I would say probably right now, I think we have 10 bears within Boulder city limits. Estes is probably lower. We probably have 5 or 6 bears in city limits right now. That's maybe just all 3 of them. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, migration is. I don't. And this is just me speculating. This is my own question. I don't think it's climate change quite yet. I think it's more of human conflict and human disturbance. The elk are just finding out they can just stay in Estes Park and stay fat and happy and keep eating. The ones that are down by I-25, they've discovered cornfields. Who doesn't like corn, especially if you're an elk or a bear? So, I don't necessarily know if it's climate change. I think they're just starting to realize there's these other safe places that they can hold out on. And that's kind of one of the challenges we're working at in general in Rage right now, is we're having issues with dispersal rates of elk particularly. We're holding on these certain parcels, they're causing damage to corn, so the landowners are getting upset with us. So one of our main challenges that we're working on right now in terms of the elk population health management here is working on dispersal rates, making sure they're not holding on one property. I've been trying for years to figure out how to keep them a little bit out of the city of Estes, and if you guys have any suggestions, they really like it in town.
Plant corn.
Plant corn outside of town. Reproduction. This should be a refresher for most of you guys. Most of you guys live here, you're from me, so you know a lot about health already. We'll just go over it a little bit. Females become reproductive around 3 years of age, so a little bit sooner than the males do. And a lot of it has to do with the competition for the males too. Like they're not going to be able to win over the ladies as easily when there's these big ones like that guy. Or I'm sure you guys have heard of Atlas and all the ones that have been named in town. We have some big ones up here. During the rut, it'll start doing, as you guys know, it'll play a sound. I'm sure you guys hear it pretty frequently. And yeah, we have two big times of the year you can conflict with elk. One is in the spring. I might have mentioned in our slide that we had 7 elk attacks this spring during calving that resulted in hospitalization for all of them. And a lot of times too, like we can help with education stuff. But a lot of times it's not even that. Like we turn a blind corner into a cow calf.
Yeah.
So that's one of the main reasons we want to work on dispersing, especially during this critical time of year, and keep them out of town, so keep them safe and but yeah, let's plan elk bugle and the cow call.
Have you heard an elk bugle yet this year?
Not this year, no. Have you?
Visitors are telling us they're like,
Really?
Yeah. Up in the southern.
That's familiar, that sound. So I had a question of the 7.
Of the 7 people that were injured and hospitalized, how many had dogs?
It's a great question, a great point. I don't think very many of them had dogs this time, but they're definitely triggered by dogs a lot. Especially with moose in particular. I don't know how many moose attacks we've had this year, maybe 7 as well. But almost all of those involve dogs, especially moose and dogs are not really the one. But a lot of these ones this year so far were just blind corners that really unfortunate. But everybody lived through, so that's happy. Could have been worse. Now we'll do the cow call, which is a little more subtle. I'm sure you guys hear this. And that was a particularly chatty cow too. A lot of times we don't chatter at our lips. But she was mad about something or looking for a calf out of nowhere. I just want to talk briefly about evolution adaptations. A lot of these we can kind of speculate. One of the biggest things with elk is that they're social animals and they herd. And that's just evolutionary adaptation. It's not just elk, it's all kinds of herding animals, especially ruminants in particular. The reason being is selfish. You got better chance of numbers than predators. So it really is just I think there's a word called like the selfish herd hypothesis. Basically, they all try to get in the center, and that's how this herding forms. Is they're constantly trying to fight to get in the center, especially when there's a predator around. So it's a selfish behavior, but also a social behavior. So it's kind of interesting. Scentless bird calves do not have symptom, which is why we really struggle when people call us saying, I found this abandoned elk calf. You know, pick it up and bring it to us or bring it somewhere. Same with deer fawns. But they are scentless bird. They don't walk within the first few days. Sometimes they eat, most of them they don't. The mom will leave them and kind of hide them. And this is how all these attacks end up happening. Is she'll hide in the bush, maybe in front of someone's front door. And that's how this happens. Is she's keeping an eye, but she's also not getting too close to let people know where her calf is exactly. But we do get lots of calls in the spring about abandoned calves. 99% of the time they're not abandoned. The mom will just go and eat, she'll do her thing, and she'll come back to the calf and she's ready to feed because she don't want to bring attention to that calf, especially when they can't walk. People will kind of think their moms are neglectful, but they're not. They're going to keep the calf safe. They're hiding because they can't smell. Predators can't smell. Migration we touched on a good amount, but yes, our third in Estes Park, as you guys all know, migrates every year to Loveland. And like we talked about, they're starting to stay longer and longer, so we'll see how that goes with some of our new rituals that we're trying. And just one last thing, the ruminants, what that means is essentially just got a big long stick that take every single nutrient they can get out of what they're eating. And most of the ungulates are ruminants, like cows are ruminants. The livestock type herding animals tend to be ruminants. And that's because they're herbivores and they have to be able to extract as much as they can out of what they're, and preferably not corn.
Question, like when they're said there's less at birth and a lot of times so I have heard people and they said, oh my gosh, but then they've been out there, she's never come back. So what is the sort of normal thing to let people know that, I mean, they can be out for hours before the mom's gonna come back, right? So I mean, what do you tell somebody that's worried like that?
I'll see what Peyton has to say too, but for me, I would say it's normal for me to not see mom for an entire day.
Exactly.
So that's what I would say. I don't know if you see something different.
Yep. Say it.
I would say at least if it's becoming more than 1 day or 2 days, that's when we'll start to take more interest in it.
Yeah.
But even then, like the mom can come back once that day, then we might not see. So she might even still be attending. We just can't always be watching. I would say a day, probably.
Good.
The very first talk we had was about an elk, female elk, who had been adopted by a guy who ran an alpaca farm here. Annie's Yellow. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yes, I've heard this story before. I don't know. I'm assuming he doesn't have it anymore. Hopefully.
Now, but she stayed with him her whole life. And
Dang. We don't agree. This was another about time I wasn't able to copy these variables as fully heard sequence. So our current numbers for what we call GMU 20, Game Management Unit 20. That's where Estes Park is. Goes down basically to Boulder County. Goes up towards kind of like the Clear River, south of the Clear River a little bit. Cundall divide. So it's just kind of a big lot that has like Estes Park, Loveland, Allen's Park, Pinewood Springs. So that's the game management unit that Payne and I mostly focused on. And this was our current numbers from this year's surveys. So it's like a few of you have done surveys here before. So we do surveys as well. A lot of times for a deer, we'll do surveys by helicopter because it's easier to do it by helicopter, but for elk, we can skew our ratios, our sex ratios, because we can tend to find like the cows, but we can't find the bulls. And that was the case this year too. There's probably about 15 big bulls that hang out in Estes Park year round. But we couldn't find them to classify them this year, even though we know they exist. So we couldn't necessarily include them in our numbers, but that's what the biologists that get paid more than Peyton and I do. So this is the last year we're trying. Our objective is actually very slightly below objective right now, but our cow-calf ratio and our sex ratios are going up. So we expect to see that increase. We did not change any of our how many tags we got. We didn't change that this year. For the reason being that dispersation we talked about. We want that pressure on them so they don't hold on one property. So we do expect this to go back up to objective right now. We're not making any changes this year. As something else starts to happen, we start something get confident, we'll definitely make changes. But we do this meeting yearly after we do all of our ground counts and our surveys and stuff. And I think my next slide probably a video about doing that. Or something else.
Well, that's when I come out with my binoculars, my spotoscope, and I am looking for animals, specifically elk today, counting the number of calves, cows, young bulls, old bulls, and ultimately keep together with our biologists. I want to figure out how many elk are out there in the landscape, and that helps us figure out how many hunting licenses we need to put out there in the landscape for 12 years. So pretty cool stuff.
So that's he's the area wildlife manager. So that map I showed you guys, he's like the supervisor for that whole part of the team. But he really likes to do surveys, so.
So question, the numbers, they had gone from like 23, 22, 21, I mean, they keep going down. Said you didn't change the number of licenses.
Well, we kind of did. So we changed the type of tags they're being used. So we upped the private property tags because that's what they're holding. So we didn't change the number of licenses. We changed where those licenses are going. So to do that, we had to decrease tags somewhere else because we don't want to increase tag rate. So we took some tags, and those are more or less Boulder County hunts. We dropped about 50 of those tags, and we added them to the private rate.
Well, my question was going to be, if, say, next year at this time, those numbers continue to decline, is the action that you can take, it's just to issue less licenses?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
But it's not a big enough change for us yet to be super concerned about that, especially looking at our cow-calf ratio right now, because it was so high this year. We expect almost not. So we expect a lot of those calves to make it through the year. So we expect that number to go up because the cow-calf ratio is so good this year compared to previous years.
So when you say wild sex ratio was 39.9 this year.
I think it was 44 this year. I calculate this our biologist anywhere, so I'm not very good with it.
So 2026, it's 39.
Oh, you're right. It's 39.9. So that's our sex ratio between males and females. So I don't actually have the number on here, but I know it's about 45 or 44. So we're seeing lots of cows this year that have calves with compared to breeds.
So you're saying there's like 45 calves for every 100 cows?
Yes. Yeah.
And then
45 calves for every 100 cows?
Yeah.
Yes.
And then for the 39.9 is, so is that,
That's this big male and female ratio. So let's say
so 39.9 males for every 100?
yes.
Okay. So for 100 or females?
Males.
39.6.
Males are always
So like 40 males to 60 females?
correct.
Right, okay.
Alright, now the fun stuff. So yes, human conflict, particularly what we're going to talk about. I've already touched on this with spring season calving. We have issues, we have attacks, and in the fall during the rut, we do have some aggressive males in town, but since I've been on for 5 years. But since I've been on, I haven't seen a ton in the fall, especially compared to the spring. And that could just be me being lucky, to be honest. But it seems like the calving season's been a little bit rougher. So they have, like I mentioned, 7 elk attacks this year that resulted in hospitalization. And then another big problem that I'm sure I talked about you guys last year, deer last year. I don't remember what I did. Yes, yeah. Feeding. Favorite thing. And the big issue with feeding is, first of all, that dispersed that we talked about is keeping these elk where we don't want them to be dispersed around. And the second issue is when they're congregating, a little bit less natural in their regard, because they're herding animals, they're always going to congregate. But when we start to increase the congregation by attracting them into areas, they're going to spread more disease, which is, in this case, chronic wasting. Our numbers are going down a little bit. We don't have a mandatory test here until maybe next year. So we haven't had a mandatory test here in a few years, so we don't know the exact number. We can speculate. But I do know Boulder County is not doing right now. I think their percent for CWD is probably around 15%. Is that something right?
15?
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds about right.
1 5.
1.5. Yeah. And I think for here right now, their estimate is below 10%. We don't know the exact. I think it's below 10 we're estimating. I say that's what the fancy biologists try to figure. But that's why we write to expert email. And we do a lot of education with it too, because you might, if you're just visiting, you're a tourist, you're just like, oh, they want food. You're probably not considering like any sort of harmful impacts. Like the tourists don't know chronic wasting diseases for them. So a lot of it's going to be education too. But for a lot of times when there's residents that know better, it's probably going to end up with citations from the sure you guys might have seen this video circulating. So that's the main question. Like stuff like this. You see the traffic things that you can cause 36. Yeah, that helped jams. So what do we do for some of those human conflicts? during the calving season in particular, when they have this aggressive elk. Or like what Peyton just earlier he did with the bears, but we can close down some of these trails. We know there's aggressive elk, especially when we know that she's already attacked them. We also will haze these elk. I'll show you a video in a second of how we haze them. And yeah, science, education, hazing, those are kind of the main things we do for aggressive elk during that year. Then, as we've already mentioned, like, our time of year adjusts. Like we might be doing bear stuff or mountain lion stuff. I'm sure we all heard about the mountain lion in January. So it's just on species based on what time of year. We're always dealing with subscription. One thing we've already mentioned is adjusting hunting license distribution to encourage elk dispersal. So like I said, we didn't raise or lower numbers, we just changed what kind of tag we're dealing now. And like we talked about, this does not start working, then it starts to have decreased tags. Educational events and signage, so like this, except almost everyone in this room is not the person who needs telling us. They already know how to be safe with help. So a lot of it's going to be, we'll have volunteers that'll come out during the summer and they'll just walk around by like the golf course. They'll talk to visitors by getting too close to elements like that. And obviously, we're also law enforcement officers, so we can also write citations for wildlife harassment and for beating up. So I think I have some videos. So here's an example of our sign. We've got 3 of these signs right now. We just ordered 6 more, I think, because it's really an issue that's changing for us. So I think we have a total of 9 signs now that we can place all around town. You might see them on the trail. But before I show you one of the videos of what Peyton and I are doing, we have 15 minutes left, so I want to leave enough time for questions first. If there's no more questions, then we can watch the videos. You guys want to watch the videos?
One of the major issues that's developing here, especially in the parks, that has to do with the detrimental effect of moose, not our weather.
Yep.
Because of their diet, etc. And and of course, that's within the park, outside your jurisdiction.
We still work
going through?
Yes.
Because I looked at the numbers, the moose,
There's a lot.
and there's such relatively few female.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the sex ratio. Oh, you mean in our in general?
Yeah, the ones, so using hunting, let's say, outside the park to try to lessen the moose population is.
Yes. And that's what they thought too. They thought like, oh, well, maybe if CPW can increase the moose tax, we can have this issue solved. But the problem is the moose don't leave the park, so they still can't be hunted.
Yeah.
So they're working out their solution. They're doing some studies right now. They started calling a bunch of moose. I think it's like maybe 20 or 30 moose they're calling. They estimate, I think, between 150 and 200 moose per grade. And I don't know what their objective is, but I know they want to be a lot lower than that because of the impact of riparian areas.
Right.
So that's something that we have meetings a few times a year with their biologists about. We talk about options. I think right now they're doing, what's the process called? The federal process? SEPA?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's where they're in the middle of the process. I don't know how far they are, but that's what they're doing.
But to most of the moose harvest that takes place, are you seeing it more in the southern part of that GMU of the moose?
I would say we see a lot of it towards
Or
yes, I would say a lot of it's localized to like Ward, Alex Park, some near Brainerd Lake, but there's new laws that guys put on Brainerd Lake. So that area like that. Yeah, a lot of our moose harvest comes from there. There's not a ton of moose, honestly, and that's just part because they're all in the national park. They like it there.
right,
They've got all spread areas there.
but somebody can call out.
Yeah. Start planting some corn.
Yeah. Go 100 yards south and let anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, like I said, it's managed by the national park, but they keep us in the loop because obviously we talked about it. Wildlife has no borders, so we always want to work with our partners. So we go to meetings with them on it.
But they're wondering if they never thought of doing a subset of the large moose GMU for additional permits that were close to the park boundaries in certain areas.
Yeah, all that's in the talks, but so far it's mostly national park decisions, so they just kind of inform us what they're doing, they ask for our advice. But right now, I think they're trying to get like option 1, option 2, option 3. I think they want 3 options, so they're not just putting all their eggs in one basket. So I think they have those out right. I don't know exactly what they are, but I think that's what's going to over their costs. Any other questions?
I have a question about your hunting tags.
Okay.
So when folks get those, do they designate anything as far as like, I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is how do you prevent people from not going after hunting? I mean, how do you, they have a tag, like, why don't you look at a tag? Or what if they get 2 instead of 1 and they only have 1 tag? I mean, how do you guys, philosophically, I mean, how do you do it? Or do they go after caps? Do they, is there any rules against sort of, or what are the ethics kind of?
Yes, this is very philosophical, but I would say that's obviously taking their job. That's why we're law enforcement officers. We spend almost every day during hunting season out where hunters are at, trying to make sure they're doing it right, trying to make sure not just that they have a license, because a lot of them do have a license. A lot of these just can be safe, so you can't have a loaded firearm or a vehicle, and that's also part of a fair chase too. Because you don't want people to just be shooting from motor vehicles. Because first of all, that's unethical. Second of all, it's not safe. So a lot of what Peyton and I do during hunting seasons, we'll go out there, try and contact as many hunters as we can, make sure they're doing it right, doing right right. But in a lot of these times too, like when we make these big cases they're talking about, where like, say somebody poached something on me. If I'm not out, I have no contact. There's good neighbors calling on each other, killing us, right? So for example, we can't go into too specific because this just happened, but there was a bear that was poached recently. And neighbors happened to just barely see it at night. We go into an investigation, we make interviews and stuff, and we're able to prove what happened. And handle appropriate citations.
Yeah, I was curious. We were hiking in Hermit Park. It was obviously a poach because all of us was the carcass was still there and the antlers were sawed off. And so when we told the folks at Hermit, they knew that they had been reported, but they couldn't actually find it. So we were at least able to tell them where to go get the carcass and pieces that were still left. But I mean, that there's poaching going on. I just wondered kind of from your perspective how that worked. That's got to be aggravating.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a retreat staff because they can use 10 more officers for us to start telling me how to keep an eye on this stuff. We're pretty short staffed, so we're limited. So a lot of it's neighbors calling each other and saying, hey, I just saw this person. Or maybe it's not poaching, but they don't also call like, hey, I just saw this person harvesting all on this property. We can go out there. Maybe it's legal, it's fine.
Well, if they've taken the carcass, that's one thing, but just to leave it laying there is a big hole.
That's
just big.
Yeah.
And it kept clear saw cuts, so that's all they were going after.
Yeah, so we call that wasted game. That's the felony.
Good.
Yeah, for sure.
I know that.
There's 2 or 3 felonies. First one's wasted game, illegal outfitting, maybe.
So it's, if I'm being honest with you, the people who do that somewhat frequently, they are on our radar.
Are they?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we have a list.
Yeah.
Making a list of like the ones, or good. It's aggravating.
It's very frustrating. Yes.
Yeah, like, I like to tell people, I get we're all human, but then again, I don't want someone taking an opportunity away from someone who's trying to do it right.
Yeah.
I'm out there doing things wrong. I'm out there trying to make sure that you think right. But if you happen to catch me doing something wrong, we can have a conversation about it. And if you're out there enough, you're old enough to be responsible for your actions, right? So we'll have a conversation about it. But yeah, you're right, it is very aggravating. But the good thing about our job is if we want to do something about it, it's on us, right? And I love my job, I love the law enforcement aspect, I live in the mountains during hunting season, so I do, I really do.
Yeah, we wear truckers. They call us our truck in our office during the season.
Communicate across the state. Or do you?
We do. It depends on, I guess, the circumstance. So say, I think the biggest example I can think of is like maybe somebody approached an animal in Estes Park, but they live in Grand Junctions.
Yeah.
So we know how to get the contact of our fellow officers, and we'll work on those cases with them.
I see. This is a rather uninformed question, and you may not be able to respond, but
Sure.
I heard there's some kind of right to hunt issue that's gonna be on the ballot this fall. Can you enlighten us?
I know very briefly what you're talking about, I'm not very interested.
I haven't read much about it either, I just saw it, and I know there's been a couple of different points of view. Like, we don't need it, is one I'd add to, and another is it's gonna be, allowed for less restriction. Let's see, and what did I do?
Less restriction, all of them are going on more restriction,
Yeah,
but again, I don't know how to accept that.
okay, I'm not sure, we'll get more.
Yeah, you'll definitely,
later, but
and that goes back to North American model of science-based management, so CPW ourselves will recommend some sort of science-based management approach. We'll take public input, and we'll go in front of the commission, the wildlife commission, which is like, how many members is it, 7, 8? I'm not sure.
When it's full, when it's weird. I do know the governor, he just recently appointed 3 new members, but I'm not sure.
I don't think they're like, yeah. So we'll go to them, and each person, I don't know if you guys know much about the wildlife commission, like each person is supposed to represent a certain background, so like a sports person, one for like an outdoor recreational, one for conservation focus. So they try to have a balance. So you kind of represent the public as a whole, and it's just, and they're the ones that are the finalists.
it seems to me, what I'm saying, it's kind of like the introduction of wolves was a citizen ballot referendum, not necessarily based on science. Anyway, so I guess we all need to get more education about whatever this is, but it sounds to me it's a little bit like that, like the public opinion versus what is the appropriate science to use in.
That, I think another thing we could do a better job of is how to be science-based, but I think we could do a better job of educating the public on why our states is what are the sciences. Because for the wolves, for example, not a lot of people knew the impact that would have if we were coming in there, like all this stuff. And I think we could have done a better job of educating people in more control that. And not just that, like any valid material, I think you can educate the public about something. I'm not getting in trouble for saying.
There's three, the science, you heard the term ballot biology.
Yeah.
Really was ballot box sociology. Go back to the first principle. That the wildlife belongs to all of us. So the science says what you can do and what the consequences of any of these actions are. But what are wildlife? So we say, given that array of what's possible, then we have a right to say what we should do. And it is, society said, well, too bad ranchers, lose a bunch of cows. And that's too bad, but that wasn't, that the science told you that was going to happen.
Exactly, we do.
And that's what we have the commission for, it represents all aspects of the public and all the public interest in the environment. And our job as CPW, the biologists, is to go and make these science-based recommendations to the commission, and the commission takes that into account along with public input. And ideally, they make good decisions. Solves every question.
What's his biggest challenge for the I mean, just in general, you look at your job and stuff, I mean, what is it?
People. Yeah, I would say in particular, this is kind of local and mainline, it's dispersal we've been talking about. If we didn't have enough time, there's a bunch of videos of like taking that tree, placing all the little chairs and wires and fences and stuff off of them. That's some of the fun stuff, but the dispersal and the student party.
So the park dealt with dispersal by fencing. Fencing, that's the part of it.
Fields or golf courses. There's some non-game species that are allowed to be hunted or not.
No, if it's not even, no.
So
We still
so
manage.
now,
Outline it considered big.
so that's a big game. Even fur bears would be considered a
Yeah, maybe more like small, the non, where it's like all like this kind of really small wildlife, just have some sort of like value, constant meter, but this is, we do manage non as well, but obviously our primary tool for management is not to, can't have not to do this, more research focused, the way we use it, because we can't really control it all, essentially, that we can't do up to the level. So I would say it's more research focused for the way we use it. And that would be like rapid stuff too. I guess in terms of paint level, though, like we'll get called like injured all we're looking about to again. That's kind of on the low end of paint level, you know what I mean? Is there anything else to add to that?
No, a lot of injured raptors deal with that quite a bit. And this time of year, raptors they can also get West Nile virus, so we'll pick up sick raptors as well. I love birds, so I love picking up birds. It's kind of a catch-22 because usually when I have a bird, it's sick or injured, which is a bummer. But that's why we're there every day to help them make sure people get back out there. So, but yeah, we don't do a ton of wildlife. So.
All right, next ones that come out, like we got a kill at the top of our hill by the Mount Vine. It was a big hole earlier in late winter. And the so close where like the spring pines goes through as if you're running people walking their dogs or lots of kids, but it still wasn't. And I remember I think it was CPW that came up there and actually took that kill and drug it up away farther, so because they knew that she was still around there. I mean, that was a really good thing. And I know for us, we lived right down that road, and it was like everybody knew that happened. But I was wondering if it was you guys that did that.
Well, a lot of times we can't always respond to those calls. So like a lot of times too, if like a call, like our cell phones are dispatched basically, because all the dispatchers have our cell phone numbers. So if I get that call and say I can't go there, I'll talk to them and like there's somebody sick or somewhere safe in your property, drag it somewhere, then I can still connect. You know, because you want them to keep it.
She came back like 3 days ago.
Yeah. But we want it to be more safe location. So it's really nice to have larger property where you can drag it somewhere where it's more safe and not running from that. Like wisely gets its food, doesn't circle out with pets or something like that.
How dangerous is it for you to drag a carcass? Teeth or something like that?
It's not super babies, I do it all the time, but we never think wild animals are wild animals. So it never hurts to take those extra safety precautions. It's nighttime, I probably went to the daytime.
Yeah.
Because they're probably the tree watch. Doesn't mean they're gonna smack you, but they're about to watch. You get hay from outlands, like if it's on your property, you can use it with like arrow horns, arrows, paint pot and things. But yeah, I would say it's relatively safe, but like don't, they're wildlife, don't just take the bird to leave in here. This is January.
But you work alone.
So this one. Wait, a lot of times you probably make not the greatest decision.
Like put it in your perspective, last time I was on Dickie, you never here, so.
So if a carcass is in a roadway or partially in a roadway, will you come out and pick it up?
What kind of carcass we talking about?
Oh, this could be
If it's an elk, a lot of times you can call us to start dispatch for emergency number. They have a road for this. Well, they'll actually utilize it for me. You just have to call us.
it's in the county, it's outside in the town, but outside of
Yeah, you can still call our state patrol non-emergency line. They can get a hold of one of us. If we're around, grab it. Most time we have access to the road for list too, so this calls them utilize it. That's what it's called. This has some sort of value.
Yeah, so if you do that, the on-call officer would show up. So tonight, find an elk carcass that got hit on the side of the highway, I'd be the one showing up to, give you a permit if you'd like to use the meat off that here.
Or to euthanize a lot of times too, like maybe it's got too broken in, something like that. Sometimes we have to euthanize it. A lot of times this PD helps us with that. I'm only one person, speaking person, so we can only do so many places at one time. But
If the meat is still very fresh, then it can be carved to us. We're taking it, so.
and yeah, that's why it's first come, first serve anybody. So if you just see it happen, you can go and grab it. You just have to make sure you notify us within 48 hours to get you done. Turns into a violation if you don't tell us. Mostly because we don't want people taking the trophy costs. So we don't want like targeting people out getting into the car, right? We don't want that. If there's any sort of trophy party,
See evidence that is sick, like staggering, or he has some dribbling or something,
You can always bring it ahead to us so we can test it for chronic waste disease. But that test can take a while to get back. So you have to meet for a while before you know if it's edible or not.
And people have done that before. They still put it in their freezer while they wait for test results to come back.
So yeah, it's cheap. It's like $20 a week for a test. The hard part's bringing us ahead. That's a lot of times we'll bring us frozen heads. We can't. Our knives are only so sharp. So yeah, we can test. Only for chronic waste disease. If it's any sort of other tests like West Nile with raptors or bird flu, that would have to go right up. You should be one of those critters that
Being on the board, but I'm sure where good people call it, it's completely on their property instead of, let's say, you're underground folks.
Yeah, we don't do any sort of carcass removal, so we can recommend some sort of livestock. Yeah, there's carcass removal, but we don't do carcass removal unless it's like rodent, we're gonna donate it. If it's awesome, unless we have a reason to suspect otherwise poaching, or some sort of disease concern, and we'll all take the responsibility.
We just tell them, let nature take its course.
That's the best thing too, is maybe a mountain lion comes across it and not trying to mountain lions eat that. Yeah, we prefer to keep the carcasses on the property if possible, unless there's a business concern. So, that's my time. I'll kind of stay for like 15 more minutes. If there's more questions, but I don't want to respect you guys.
Show it to you or
You want some of the video? So this one was last week by. There was it was an elk that shares on the trail, so we saved her out that trail. We had to close down a little bit, but she's still charging people, so we used pepperball gun, which is essentially a paintball gun, but she's these little. It's a little bit extra long to keep them moving. And then but they can be really good at hiding their calves. So I could have walked right past if I had no idea, but I suspect there was one because of her behavior, but I've been found. The rest should be removals. That's how we're doing. To be completely honest with you, I sometimes forget why tranquilizing animals. Most of us something stuck on their head in the screen. But some ways I don't remember exactly why I did what I did.
So yeah, this one was last year, just north of the visitor center. This cow was walking around with a tomato cage around her snout and around her head. So we tranquilized her. She got some cool earrings, bling. That's the tomato cage off.
because you're not collaring any. CPW doesn't collar any.
Not unless we're doing a specific research project, which we're not.
So if we see a collar like K or A,
It's old.
C, how old?
Depends on the number.
Yeah, it depends on which ones the archives are own clauses as well. But if it's ours, it's probably
Say that again, how
probably 10 years old, maybe if it was our collar. That was to make it good for another.
old? We saw.
Training like that, how long do you have to work?
It depends because they can respond and play to different drugs. Sometimes maybe I'll get too low of a dose or too high of a dose. I would say typically we have at least 30 minutes to an hour to work. But we also reverse that once we're done working. So we'll give them another drug that wastes that. But the whole process, if everything goes well, which it's not it's only about an hour for us to fully go through tranquilizing it, getting whatever off of it, and working.
Do you do any testing on them when you tranquilize them for?
Not really. Or doing one or how anything. No, sometimes with bears we can take or we can put tags in them. We don't really keep the research wise with elk just because they're so visible in Essence Park that we know a lot about their behaviors. So we don't necessarily have a reason to, especially coming up that we have another mandatory year for chronic waste disease checks, which means every single hunter that harvests that year has to take it and get tested. So we'll know a lot better of what our percentage is like the chronic waste.
And is that this, do you say that's this year?
I think it's next year.
I think it's 2027.
Yeah, so next
Or
I think there's some videos somewhere. Oh, I put them on I have an Estes Park Facebook page so you guys can all follow if you want. But that's where you'll see a bunch of my fun videos. A lot of entanglements.
Do you have that moose one?
I do have the moose one if you guys want to see. That one kind of viral.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
It's another one.
Is that what it was?
It's like a tarp, like a blue tarp.
Yeah. So like typically, we don't always tranquilize unless you know for years they have something entangled in their head. But basically what we're looking at is physical, can they see, can they eat, and can they breathe. So sometimes, you know, we can get now like a rope or a hair wrapped around its snout and it can't open its mouth to eat or drink. So then that's definitely injuries. That's where we would for sure tranquilize it is to really most likely starve it for that.
Yeah. The one Peyton was talking about, there was a moose that's in a water canal.
These are antlers eventually, so if it's only you can tangle that.
Exactly. Yep. There it is.
Like friend.
So there I made it the drugs, like it's going to sleep service. Awesome. We've been getting back now for a while.